Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to film this episode today on growing up Munchausen style, basically. My life has been very abnormal, all due to my mother having Munchausen by proxy, poisoning batches of food. From behind the scenes, she's used other people along the way my entire life, basically since I started kindergarten, preschool even. She used other people from behind the scenes, would tell them things about me and get them to act a certain way toward me. And that began as a very young child, and it continued on all the way through high school, middle school, elementary school. It continued on the entire time I stayed in school. And her actions, which were actually crimes, had led to me eventually getting suspended for the rest of my junior year in high school. And I had already been at my job for a while and just started working full-time instead, and I had a second job as well. So right away I became gainfully employed as soon as that happened solidly, and I was about 17. So and I'd been with the same two companies for a while at that point. So all that did was get me in a different mindset, because I saw how much money I could make right away. And that was a lot of money I was making at that age, in that time period, because it was the early 2000s. And I was making $1,000 a week. So, it was just, it was different. So once it came time to go back to school, I didn't, want to return. I just remained working the way I was and where I was at for numerous years. And then eventually graduated through the mail and went to Dorsey Business School for an entire year. With a friend of mine growing up, we both went together. So we went for an entire year for that, graduated from that. And then eventually I did take some college credits down the line. But by the time I had done that several years later, I had so much life experience, and I seen like where things at as a whole, as a bigger picture of the world and how it's structured, how things work. I was just wasting my time at that point, because my knowledge was so far beyond anything they were trying to teach. My life experience was that great at that time. I believe I was like 25, 26 when I did that. So I knew I didn't need any further college education. But what happened was I always had a good job, and I always owned my own home since I was 18 and had kids at 18 and 21. So I had my own home, my first home, for 6.5 years, lived in it for 4.5 years before buying my second one. But all of these home purchases, they were forced each time, because my mother's in the background using agencies to chase me from home to home. And then eventually I walked away from a home, worked quite a bit, had a different support system where I had rooms in a couple of houses, and my kids had rooms in a couple of houses. And I made it work because they were always at school, and I was always at some type of work or another, but I was also self-employed. So I had some control over, I worked for Applebee's for a while, for several years. They have a pretty good leniency on what time frames you want to work and make some money and get out of there, because you can make really good money there as a server or a bartender. And so that's what I was doing, and I was doing other things as well, and there was just all this stuff going on. But I made it work where I just went without a home for a little while, saved my money, because it was after the market had crashed, the homes were cheap. I was able to get enough to pay cash for the entire home. And I knew that's what I was about to do, but my mother's here in the background wiping out the rug from under me, using agencies to chase me still. It turned into a situation, and she went on an escapade in 2013, and it completely wiped out all the money I had saved after filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy after I walked away from my second home. The first home, the bank messed up the payments on about 5 years in. Or no, it was 6.5 years in, because that's why we ended up walking away from the whole thing, because it was their mistake, and they... we were going to file bankruptcy anyway, so it didn't matter. It just went in the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and then I walked away from both homes because I was upside down on my mortgage ×4, because I bought it right before the crash. So I was in a no-win situation there. And then the bank, I did try to negotiate and get a lower interest rate, because the interest rate was way too high. It was 9.25. That's extremely high. That's unacceptable, except, for what was going on at that time. It was banks robbing people. So since they didn't want to negotiate, and I realized how cheap the houses were getting, because this kept happening, I just figured, I'll work a lot and I'll be able to buy a house with cash in a year. So I did really good, started another business during this. We're doing all this, but at the same time, here's my mother in the background wiping out the rug from under me. And really still at this point have no clue, because I was very healthy, I was very high functioning, and I would go to the gym like 5-6 days a week. And I'm doing like numerous forms of income. I have all these things rolling. I'm driving my kids to school. And then, they spend a significant amount of their time at school while I'd be working some of my shifts, and then I would work late at night on the weekends as well, and they'd be sleeping for the majority of that. So it was, it's different, but it worked, and I had numerous sets of people. When I walked away from the other house and just went in between where I was going to pay cash for one, it wasn't really a big deal because there was several sets of places with rooms for us. So that's why I was able to pull that off. But during this time, my mother's trying to tell people that she's always had custody of my older 2 kids and she had raised them. Now that's going to play a role into later down the line when I get closer to kind of bringing all these situations together at once. Because she kept doing this from the time they were very small. I don't know when it started exactly, but that's what she portrayed to everybody, and she pulled it off because I had no contact with any family members or her directly. But since my parents were married, my dad would pick up my kids, bring them home, and since they'd be in the same house, or if they went somewhere, they'd be all together. And with her telling people she raised my kids in the background, they just believed her. And so when they'd show up these places, no words were ever said. They just show up together, and it looks that way. So that's what's been going on all these years, and I didn't really start figuring out until the 2013 escapade. So I'll get to that in its own video, but that's what caused a significant restart in my life, because here I had the money to pay cash for a house, and I wasn't planning on using a mortgage again. I did end up having to get one, and then I almost bought one house. I probably should have went with it. I would have made money no matter what, but I just didn't. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And we waited, and so the house that I have today, so I believe we waited like 2 years, whatever, and then that's how I have the house I have today. But it should have been a different house a couple of years earlier, is what it should have been. But here's my mother in the background wiping me out repeatedly, causing agencies to chase me, using court systems, filing false court proceedings on my kids, trying to say I'm mentally unstable. She's got this underlying groundwork from the time I was a young child to teenager. First, as a young child, she was saying I'm bad and I'm this and I'm that. I don't really know what she was saying, but stuff along those lines. I'm just this terrible child. And then as teenage years went on, she's trying to say I have this mental disorder, this drug problem. But since I've been working since such a young age, and I started my first business at 11, I was just growing into my own self while I was off doing these other things, and then just returning home and going to school and staying isolated there, basically. And I'd read books late at night. So, I always get my experience other ways, and I always had a really good ways to make money, and I continued that on. But here my mom was getting mad that she's setting me up for a failure by calling these teachers, these agencies, just doing anything she can to try to get me arrested or locked up, deemed mentally incompetent on paper in some way, shape, or form. It's always been a goal of hers. Bottom line, that's what it comes down to. This all sounds crazy, but this is Munchausen by proxy. It doesn't have to be a physical injury. People can portray someone to look mentally ill or on drugs or both for the same concept, for attention. It makes them look sick, especially if other people believe that to be real. And with how I'd cut everybody off and left, nobody knew anything about me. So it was never verifiable. Everybody just believed everything she said, and no one was aware that I'd totally cut ties with everybody and just walked in opposite directions and started building my life. So then here it's pissing her off because she's causing all these problems where I have to leave a home and leave another home and restart, and it's happened so many times that I'm always having to stay 10 steps ahead. So from a very young age, I had numerous streams of income, even before I bought my first house. So, it always stayed that way. And here she was, thinking she's going to keep ripping the rug out from under me, and each time she does this to me, what I would do is I would level up even more. I would rebuild even bigger each time this would happen. And this was really starting to piss her off. And then especially at the time, back then I was working out a lot, and I was in really good shape, looking like top of the line, and so I'm sure that really bothered her. I'll get more into that later, but there was a significant change at one point as well, right around the 2013 situation. So this was kind of probably a contributing factor. So I'll get all on that in its own episode, but here I am. Here she is trying to go out of her way to make sure I fail, and I'm having all these problems, which I am, and I'm barely managing. I'm hanging on. I'm doing this. But, this was something different because usually, the Munchausen by proxy people aren't usually as, what's the word for that? Calculative, this is very, very calculated in advance. This is an extreme, I don't know how she thinks she's not neurotypical. That's the problem. So when I say my mother to people, they misconstrue that word and think of their own cookie baking loving mother. And the problem is she's never been that person. There was never any bond. The problem is that never happened. There is no other children. My parents are still married. I was their only child. That she didn't ever want kids. Ended up having me by C-section, and then I was born pretty early, so I was in an incubator for, I believe it was 3 weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then I eventually got to come home, but by then my dad was the one doing all the taking care of me because she was poor me. I had to have a C-section, poor me. So she never really bonded with me, and my dad did all of that. And then she needed to be taken care of when she got home, and then she got jealous of me being born, a newborn baby needing taken care of, a preemie, and she was jealous that he was taking care of me. She never took on the role of a mother to bond with the baby. That's part of the problem. Not only that, she has narcissistic personality disorder, all of the traits. I'm just saying, there's a professional involved. There has been for 5 years. We at least baseline know what the conditions that we're dealing with. There's more, obviously, like I keep saying, undiagnosed. These are undiagnosed, but there's a professional involved in what she's been doing for sure. It's at least those two conditions, because that she fits all the description of all of them, and now we've watched this play out in front of our faces for 5 years with her involved. So it's not like she can't see that those are the two, base conditions, personality disorders, technically, not even mental disorder, personality disorders. So yes, there's more to it. Like I said, you're not going to get a proper evaluation on her at this point without a criminal minds team. So I know no one's really thinking, they can't comprehend that because everybody has a bond with their mother usually, and not in my case. Like, I had that with my father. That's the issue. It's not usually the other way around in a situation like that, and it was. And the fact that they're still married, that's just the way it always was. So he just took on that role, and she didn't, and just kept doing her and whatever she was doing, and they never had any more kids because she never wanted kids, and she kept trying to make me look bad. And there's reasons why it turned worse around age 3, 4, and 5. And I'll get into that in a different video, and it has to do with me being a little bit spiritual, because I always kind of was when I was little, and I just didn't really know. So that's part of it, and there's some other factors, so I'll get into that when I get into the spirituality aspect of that playlist that I haven't started yet. But I will talk about that in the future, because that plays a big role in a lot of what's going on as well, in many different aspects. So that'll be its own playlist when I get to that. I'm just trying to explain to people, when I'm trying to say my mother, you're thinking I'm bashing my mother. No, this deranged lunatic really did all of these crazy things to me, has committed all these crimes, and so far has gotten away with it to this day. These are ongoing. Using these agencies to wipe me out and be on to the next one, and then it pisses her off more that I'm able to rebuild after each one, because I have to stay so far ahead of the game. And I learned that from a very young age, that it would piss her off more, and it got out of control, basically, because it's not just that. I mean, it's caused all these extreme issues in my life. If you watch my other videos, I've had severe carbon monoxide poisoning, left untreated, 5 brain injuries, left untreated, had to pay for my own treatment at a private facility. All these crimes are going on in the background. Not a normal life. I have an extremely abnormal life. All the circumstances that I've been through and whatnot, like, my mother's at the root of each, because each piggybacks off the last, and it's been snowballing for so many years. Basically, since my injury, it became out of control, because I was the one running everything, building everything, and I was always very healthy. And when you come to a dead halt, when you get clotheslined like that, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're completely laid out, and you can barely get done the bare minimum just to get through a day, to make sure you still have a roof over your head. If I had not been self-employed, no, we would have never made it through that. So to go from the functioning I was to that, and then still make it out of that, after she did her best to make sure I did not receive treatment in a medical emergency at Beaumont, where she was a 45-year employee, that's part of the Munchausen by proxy, withholding medical treatment. So she'll either wait for something to happen or insert herself in something once something does happen, or she'll cause it to happen from the background using other people. So she'll triangulate, so this person comes to this person, and this person starts something with this person, and then this person doesn't even know what's going on, and it turns into a whole fight. So it's basically what she does, and sometimes it's more than just like 3 ways. So I'm talking, it'll be turning into 4 or 5, 6, 7 angles, And so that's another part of the issue. That's what she does. That's how she's able to falsify medical records, get false information entered in mine and my son's and my dad's medical records. She knows how to weave in and out of the systems, especially the medical system. That's how she was getting my dad's meds pulled from his chart. That's part of the Munchausen by proxy. So people aren't comprehending what I'm trying to say when I'm talking about my mother, or you think, I shouldn't be saying that, or I should be happy I have a mother. No, absolutely not. This is one of the most extreme forms of abuse. What I've been through is the most extreme circumstances, because once all of it comes out, and it will, it's going to be probably made into a movie, because it is one of the most extreme cases out there, up there with the ones that are pretty well known. So, and this is very extreme, because the amount of, if I was not who I was, I would have never made it. My son and I would have never survived any of this. And the fact that I managed to barely hang on each time she inserts herself in a problem, and it's making her madder and madder, and she keeps doing it, and she's been doing this for so long now, because I was, in preschool, I was like 4 or 5 maybe when this all started, and she grew it to using other agencies once I got my own home, and I didn't know, because I was just working all the time and going about my business, not understanding why I'm having all these additional problems in life that other people don't seem to have quite like that. Just didn't really know why, because I spent so much time working, and I was, no contact with her, so that makes it harder to figure out. But it was my injury that caused everything to become known, because then during the injury, her behavior got, the way she was withholding the treatment and pulling people aside, and I seen her do it numerous times. So I figured out what she was doing, because I already kind of knew how she operated in the first place, like years ago. She does that just with regular gossip. So then I realized what was going on, and then I ordered my medical file, and then I started seeing some of what was written. And then when I'd come back, I'd still left without treatment, and I'm like suffering an extreme state of suffocation and brain swelling, can barely talk, can't string sentences together, could barely even get to the hospital 5 minutes down the road. I shouldn't have been driving at all, but I could barely get there. I couldn't get from room to room in my house. That's how bad it was. And she was withholding treatment, using others to enter information for her to, so I would not receive treatment, and it was terrible. That's how we ended up in such an extreme case. The case that we have is very extreme, and it didn't have to be as bad. It could have definitely been, that could have had a significant change had we had gotten treatment right away the way we should have. Just like how my mother withholds my dad's pain pills in between transfers at the hospital, same thing. She knows how to manipulate the system during the transfer and make sure they're removed from, when he transfers over, is what I kept catching her doing. So she likes to cause pain and suffering, mental and emotional pain and suffering. Clearly she feels like I took my dad's attention from her and just never wanted kids and was always jealous, and that's why there was never any more kids. But then I had kids young, and she wanted to gain attention for saying, because of my age, that I shouldn't have kids, and wanted to tell people she raised them and had custody of them for numerous reasons. So I'll get to all that, and you can view the other videos on some of this stuff. But these are crimes. They were considered kidnapped. My daughter twice, my older son once. My youngest is not allowed to have a relationship with her. These are the things she pulls. She waits for something to happen, or even if she finds out I go on a date with somebody, like, mind you, I've always made all of my own money. Like, it does not matter who I date or when or what I'm gonna do. I've always paid all my own bills and made all my own money and had all my own stuff. So anytime I would date somebody, she would make up a whole fake story about, oh, she's dating this loser, and she ran off over here, and then there's false court cases getting filed saying I don't know how to parent my kids, and she needs custody of my kids, but there's no grandparents' rights in Michigan. So then she uses their dads and tells them, they don't have to pay child support if you sign this paper, and they just sign it, not even understanding anything that was typed in there and what was wrote. And she hired an attorney to write a whole false go against me and just get the dad to sign it. Doesn't even know what the hell is going on. So it turns into a situation where she's triangulating again, quadrupulating at this point, and they happen numerous times. And it creates chaos. It wipes me out, then I lose money. I lose a lot of money every time she does this. I've lost over $500,000 for sure. Probably closer to $1 million from all the restarts, the chaos, the problems. It just keeps going. But that's part of her disorder. It started at a very young age. Grew to that. Like I said, started with elementary, kept on going up. Turned into, when I cut ties at 18, I just had no clue she was going to be calling all these agencies. Instead, it wasn't teachers, it was agencies and such. And I just couldn't figure out what the fucking problem was all the time. So it's still going on today. I had to learn how to accommodate all that into my life, because that's not normal to have to live like that. And I've always had to stay like 10 steps ahead, 20 steps ahead, all the time. I've been planning on making these videos for 6 years now. I knew I was supposed to be making them, and I couldn't get to them because of how injured I was and how I could not speak. I had to learn how to string sentences together. I couldn't talk. I couldn't have the sound of my own voice. I couldn't sit up. I had to stay laying down with the back left side of my head pressed against the top part for 3 years. So, yeah, it was like, you know, I couldn't do this back then, and I knew I was supposed to. I didn't know if I was ever going to get to a place where I could, because I stayed so messed up for so long, and I eventually reached a place and a time where I could get to do some of these videos. So all this chaos these people are currently creating in my life, I'm finally getting to tell my story and deliver it and put it on YouTube like I'd planned all along. I just knew I wouldn't be able to do it soon, because not only am I talking about, you know, I'm talking about a lot of subjects in my mother's situation, because that needs to be addressed, and she needs to be apprehended in the current sooner than later. And it's more than just her. There's numerous sets of people involved in all that, because she's used others along the way to help carry out these crimes. And these are crimes because I have documentation and proof, and I can line everything up because I put it all together myself over the years. I've been putting it together for about 2 years paperwork wise, really gathering information and pictures and video for 6 years. So it's all there. It's all there. Everything can be proven for the most part. And everything I'm stating in this, everything that I'm talking about on my channel, these are all facts. This is all my real true life story, all actual events, not exaggerated whatsoever. So yes, this all stemmed back from my mother having Munchausen by proxy, never bonding with the baby, my dad taking on the role of the mother. So, you know, that's probably part of why I'm like normal-ish, you know what I mean? Because if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be the way I am. But yeah, in most households, it's just backwards. Just have the other parent or whatever. And that's kind of how I always viewed it. But I had no idea she was up to all these malicious activities for quite some time. I knew there was something wrong with her. I knew because she would neurologically flip. Like, you know, the mask would come off the narcissist when we'd be alone, and she'd be gaslighting the shit out of me my entire life from the time I was a small child. And I was being so heavily gaslit, and I knew I wasn't lying, and I'd be trying to tell people, and I was so little that they wouldn't believe me. And she started this lie from the time I was 3, 4 years old, that I'm always known to lie. I can never be believed. And I have a picture of her texting my dad that. So it's like, I know that's what she's been telling people. None of that's real. She's been telling people, I don't know what she's told people, but I've always been out here owning my own home, rebuilding each time she wipes me out from another home, or getting another one, or still just leveling up again. And it keeps happening, and it's pissing her off that she's creating all these obstacles, and then I hop over them like it was not a problem. It is a problem. It's just I've been so used to it, but it's extreme abuse. And so my drive and motivation is like 10, 20 times a regular person's. Excuse me. And that was due to the way I had to be that way from day one, knowing once I walked out on my own, that I couldn't count on her, because of everything I knew she was up to some. I knew I had to get out very young. I was probably 10 when I realized I had to get out. So I knew I had to know where to fall back to, because I don't have siblings or grandparents. And all these family members were brainwashed about me. Most of them are a little older than me, so most of them were brainwashed. 99% of them were brainwashed about me from the time I was a small child. So I cut ties with all of them and just didn't talk to any of them, and everybody just believed all the delusions because she had contact with all these people and just kept it all going all these years. But really, here I was never lying. I was always telling the truth, and I was working from a very young age and always had a stream of income since I was 11. The babysitting service took off. A few of us had steady work until we started working jobs at 13, 14, 15 years old. So, yeah, you know, like growing up Munchausen style, you gotta, not that this is funny, but there isn't too many people that can understand this. You know, like I'm used to it because I grew up this way. I didn't ever have an actual mother in that sense. That doesn't exist in my world. So how can you miss something you've never had? So I'm not really missing something because I never had it in the first place to miss it. It was never there to begin with. So that's why when I say my mother, people misconstrue what I'm trying to say when I'm trying to report the crimes and what's been going on. And, you know, this is all still going on. There's all these ongoing problems, and these are very serious crimes and problems. And no one's listening. So the fact that she poisons food, you know, it's caused problems. It's long-term problems for me. You know, I normally don't ingest it, but, you know, it's rushed my dad back to the hospital many times since his injury. It was going on long before his injury. and I've been telling him, and he did admit it in 2019. He admitted, and I have a text saying something along the lines of, oh, she's been better since she retired, which was like right before COVID. So obviously he knows there's something wrong. He's admitted it numerous times before his injury. His state of mind now would not be able to verify any of this. She's been there for a year now, brainwashing him with delusions every day, with none of the rest of us really being there much. So, she caused that based on the lies she told the police department and the facility, and she actually committed those crimes, and I can prove it. No one's looking into it properly. It doesn't matter that it played out in probate court. That was falsely done as well, and I can prove all of it. So the fact that no one's looking into this is another issue, because that's what's going on in the current. She's still using these systems and these agencies to create problems and chaos and conflict, and she doesn't want you to have, there's no emotional love. Being a narcissist don't actually love. I think some people know that, but like her eyes are black. You can tell there's a spiritual problem, because that's directly related, but that no love, no emotion. And then with the Munchausen by proxy, they don't want you to have a support system and the ability to maintain your income, and she likes to try to disrupt the income and use other people to try to do it, or places phone calls to make that type of stuff happen, or that's part of the reason I became self-employed at so early on in the game, because I've been working for a while at that point, almost 10 years, but that's part of the reason I became self-employed, and it worked from there, and it worked for me. So I stayed with it, and then you're more in control of everything, and you're not dependent upon somebody else. It just sucks if you happen to have a really extreme injury along the way. So that's the only problem with that. But there's a lot of jealousy and envy regarding how I kept staying ahead of the game and always trying to, jumping all these hurdles, coming out on top, and then I'm still ahead of her. That's part of the jealousy and envy. She's mad that I did all that by myself, whereas she's never paid any of her bills herself. She's been spending her money freely while my dad pays everything. So she just doesn't want to believe that I am who I say I am, and I became who I set out to become. I believe I wrote this little vision board when I was 10 or 11, and she found it. She must have took it at some point. She saved it in about 6 years ago when I started putting all this together. She had my dad dump some totes off to my house, and it had all this stuff in it, and that was one of the things that was in it, was this dream vision board I had to be successful. And so her idea of successful is, you go to college forever and you do that one thing forever, and that's how you become successful. So because I did not do that, in her eyes I was never successful, and she can't let anybody know that I was never successful, because she wants to stay on this power trip about how I didn't go to college. The funny thing is, I have more education than she does. I went to school for medical billing. I just never got in the field. I was already making way more money. I was way more advanced. And then been with the same company for years. And then I did go attend some college credits for a while, but there was no point. I was so far ahead of that in the game of life and how it all works and how the bigger picture of the world works. Like, she's in the small little box at the bottom. I'm like, I have the whole world and then some beyond that. So, it's different. I generate money differently. I have cash flow. I'm self-employed. That's how things work. They still work a certain way, but she's creating all these problems along the way, which has led to 2 bankruptcies in the past 15 years. I had to file Chapter 7, back in, I believe it was 2011, and then Chapter 13 a little over a year ago. But it's all due to her crimes and the agency jumping. I still managed to hang on each time, barely. But, it's out of control. Like, the behavior, the malicious gossip and slander and defamation of character, it's to the most extreme degree. I've never seen any other case like that where it's been over 1,000 people over the course of my lifetime, for sure. The amount of people that slander and gossip and all these people, whatever they believe, this false narrative, it's destroyed my life, because it involves every single person I've ever met, like through anybody through their side of the family. So it's always been an issue, which is why I cut everybody off so young, and then it became worse because I was long gone, and here she made this false narrative so extreme that it's now pissing her off that I can't. Not only did I come out on top ahead of where I would have already been if I had went your dumb route and stayed under your thumb and did what you wanted me to do. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm building. That's never what I was after. I did everything I chose to do. I achieved all that, except for I lost several years to carbon monoxide and brain injuries. I am permanently disabled, permanently injured. So it's a lot harder to, I'm more limited on what types of business I can get into, or for how long, or how it all works and how much time I have to spend, because There's times I get wiped out, or times I have to shelter in place at home. So there's numerous things here. Everything is getting restructured currently. A lot of this was already planned in advance. I just can't make any of the things move any faster right at this moment, except for make these videos and get them out there, because eventually the story is going to blow. It's going to make national news. This is such an extreme case, and all these crimes and all these people involved, all these agencies. So I do believe they have like a small little group of them from this agency or that agency, and the friend group over here, I don't know, something like that. And they're all kind of in on it together, and I'm gonna get more into all that. But that's what it's like growing up with the Munchausen mother. That's what she's doing. So she's doing many different things. There's been numerous attempted murders on my life, my dad's life, my son's life. Numerous kidnappings, numerous sets of fraud. Gotten away with all of this so far to this day, and it's beyond that. It's the extreme abuse, the use of the agencies, all the false reporting, telling people I'm mentally unstable with a gun. Like, okay, you're stating that all wrong. First of all, you made up the entire thing. I'm allowed to own a gun. Like, what the heck? She doesn't think about things properly. That's not neurotypical either. But it's hard for regular people to understand. That's what I dealt with. Even though I had no contact with her for 20 years, we just started having very minimal contact once my dad's injury happened, and we'd come in passing from time to time. But other than that, I've been completely separate all these decades, and no one's comprehending that either. So when I'm trying to tell my situation, like, no, this woman is behind the scenes using hundreds of people to do all this overall in the last couple decades. Like, this is insane. So if you watch the rest of the story, you'll understand it all. It makes more sense to watch it in order. Watch the intro videos first, watch the carbon monoxide poisoning first, and then click about through the rest of the videos. But what I'll do is, because I didn't really talk about the extreme parts of the injury, I just want to get the base story out so I could get more of the videos out. So I will come back and do another section on the more extreme parts of the carbon monoxide poisoning if that's something somebody's having problems with, because I know a lot of people are. I'll be back and do that, and I'll come back with another one and talk about some more of the Munchausen style growing up. Thanks, bye.